Hi, biohackers. Welcome back to the BioHackers podcast. I'm your host, David James Clark IV, here with the amazing Alex Feltus, Science Dude.
Oh, thank you for throwing in dude. You said it just like I wanted you to.
Yeah, no, I was going to say Alex Feltus, Science Guy, but I think Science Guy has been taken, so you're Science Dude. Are you good with that?
I am. The dude's so much more 2022, right? That's what all the kids are saying.
That's right. Hey, you know what else is 2022? The opening song. All right, there we go. Hey, today we have an amazing special guest. I've been excited about this episode for a while. Dr. Tyesha Farmer, who has a really inspiring story to share with us about access to STEM and biotechnology research and skills for underrepresented groups. She's teaching at an HBCU at Alabama A&M. She participated in some biohackathons with some of her amazing students. And before we bring Dr. Farmer onto the show, I want to talk a little bit about the kind of open source mission of Praxis.
I've been involved with the open source movement since I've started my bioinformatics career. Open source is where you can go and you release software. It's kind of for free, but it has a license associated with it where you have to, if you improve code, you have to have the improvements be shared with everybody. But you can pull off code and sell it and be commercialized with a lot of licenses. And then, but you still have to always contribute back to the original source code. So it's a way some people make money off of it and, help build this open source thing. But the idea behind it is really democratized access to software. So you don't have to go spend, zillions of dollars on some statistical package. You can go and download a free package, and be able to use it. And so this is also very much in line with the way I was taught in science is you do science and you publish it and share it with the world. Right. Yep. And so instead of more of which is totally fine too. You do some stuff, and carve it off and get intellectual property protections on it and do it. But I'm all about I like to focus my stuff on democratized and have full respect for other people, but also democratize access, not just software, but compute. And that's one thing that we're doing at Praxis AI, right, is really trying to open up really the training to access compute systems that everybody theoretically has access to, but it's not really democratized because they don't know about it and they don't know how to use the systems. And so if we do that, and everybody has democratized access sort of, I guess, to the internet. I mean, you have to pay somebody at some point to get your internet once you get onboarded with it. But once you have access, it's where you can do what you want. And that's what we're trying to do with, research, right? And biotech research, but keeping it open to the citizen scientist. And
open to the citizen scientist. That's a great point, is the idea that anybody can be a scientist, anybody can, become a bioinformatician, and make a difference. We're all in this together. We're trying to solve big problems. And you've always said the cure for cancer is going to come from, the unexpected student in the back of the room who's too shy or, too insecure to be in the front of the room. But you put democratized access to resources and data intensive computing in front of them, and they can just do wonders with it.
Exactly. That's the whole point. Yeah. The way I think about it kind of funny is that I have a picture of a person who's getting expelled from school for poor behavior and they don't do any of the work. And then they go off and get their Nobel Prize because they just cured cancer. So they just
Bill Gates dropped out of Harvard. Yep.
Yeah.
Same thing. Yeah. I mean, I do think the geniuses are misunderstood and we just need to get the right skills and the right tools into their hands with the right kind of nurturing, the mentoring, et cetera. And they're just going to do amazing things. And that's really what Dr. Farmer's about, in this African-American community, specifically in Alabama, but, now trying to scale it beyond, just like yourself in South Carolina, scaling it beyond by
Yep.
using the virtual digital platforms and, like you said,
Yep.
democratized compute, biohackathons. And these are all free, by the way. The whole idea is, again, democratized access means everybody gets access to, to all the resources and skills so that they can cure cancer, help with the food supply, solve, big, serious problems.
Yeah, I think it's important. I didn't really understand this kind of obvious thing for a while, but democratized is not free. Somebody, especially for compute, somebody's got to pay it. But there's lots of things that are being subsidized by the government. Lots of compute systems, that are out there for people to access. But it is important to know that they're there. But one of the things I've noticed is that lots of small schools don't have the money. Schools that have a lot of money. I can think of some Northeast schools that don't have the campus computing they need, but they do have it. They just don't know they have it with the access a lot of the national compute systems, and just getting that out there. But the geniuses can tap into it and cure cancer, but they have to have the training to be able to do that, right? But before they get the training, they have to get the training. They have to have been discovered or have the training put in front of them, and that's the tough thing to do, right? To train people, just to have it out there, because how do you reach students, especially somebody like me, where I'm like, if I'm 40 years away from somebody that I'm trying to reach, I don't even know how they operate. My kids are getting older, so I have actually no clue now. If somebody's under 16 years old, I have no idea how they think or what they do or what apps they use.
This is where the crowdsourcing and the peer mentoring and, getting the students to teach each other, collaboration tools like Discord and stuff are so important, because then they start to become, these support groups and collaborative teams, is really the best solution. And it'll be exciting to hear what Dr. Farmer has to say about, again, democratized access, how she's reaching out to these underrepresented groups. She's participated in some of our activities. We'll hear a little bit about, what she thinks of that. So let's welcome her to the show. Hi, biohackers, and welcome back. We are very fortunate today to be joined by Dr. Tyesha Farmer. How you doing today, Dr. Farmer?
I'm doing good. How are you, David?
I'm awesome. Thank you so much for joining the podcast. We're really excited today to talk to you. And typically we like to start out with Alex introducing the guest, because you and Alex met each other first. We're new friends. And I'd love to hear Alex's story. Alex, where did you meet Dr. Farmer, and what have you guys been working on?
So I think this is the way we met. So correct me if I'm wrong, but I knew at Alabama A&M, I knew the chief information officer, Damian Clark, who used to be the CIO at Alabama A&M, and he's a good friend. He's just an amazing person, very, very philosophically aligned with me. And when he was, I think, relatively new there, and he was looking for doers in people do biology and they're doers at the school. And your name went to the top of the list real fast, if I remember correctly. And so he was a way to get to faculty. This is way you typically, you can look up websites of colleges and see who's there. But when you find somebody who's, doing stuff the way you want to do it, they know the people that are doing similar things. So I believe that's how we met. But it's been more than a day, so I'm not exactly sure. My mind gets rebooted a lot.
Yeah, so it definitely was through Damien. Yeah. Because he sent me an email saying, "Hey, I have this friend, and he does bioinformatics, and are you interested in this area?" And it just so happens that that's an area that I really wanted to kind of develop here at A&M for our students, because so many of them were coming to me at the time wanting to do research, and there's limited space in my research lab. So I was like, well, if you have a computer, you can do some bioinformatics based research. So maybe this is something I should look into. Yeah. So it started that way. You're right, Alex.
Well, well done.
And
And Dr. Farmer, you just bring up a really important point, and that is this idea of scaling research. Like you said, there's limited amount of space in your lab. Alex, similar situation and limited amount of space in his Clemson lab. And so really the company was created, this Praxis movement was created so that we could open up the research opportunities to anybody with a computer and internet access. We want to talk about that in just a moment, the biohackathons and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then also, you think of it as a pyramid, the base of the pyramid is training. Then once you've been trained in some of these techniques and these tools, you can then do the research and then ultimately, get a great job. But before we go there, I want to back up a little bit and hear your story, because you have a really inspiring, story about how you got into science and how you became, a doctor. Congratulations. That's not easy. I know because I tried and failed, and everybody I talk to are doctors. I'm very jealous. And then how you got in, became a professor, et cetera.
Yeah. So, well, I'm from rural Alabama, very rural Alabama. And, there's lots of charms about coming from a really, really small place. But one of the downsides is that there was not a lot of economic resources and opportunities and job opportunities, for example. So, I grew up in, abject poverty. There's no other way pretty much to describe it. Mm-hmm. And, you not being able to see individuals in those spaces, having PhDs and running their own labs and that kind of thing, you have a ceiling, right? So you have expectations of what it is that you're possibly going to be able to do in life. And for me, I thought, well, I'm good at writing, so I'll probably end up being a fictional writer, and that'll be my career, because I had a wild imagination. But when I was in high school, one of my teachers was a really, really wonderful teacher, Miss Valentine Wright. She was telling me about this internship program that was at UAB called BELPRA, and it stood for Biotechnological Experiential Learning Program for rural Alabama. And so it was a USDA-funded opportunity, and they were trying to get students in rural Alabama interested in going into biotechnology-based careers. And so I thought, well, I'll apply, but I probably won't get selected because they're going to be choosing people from all over Alabama, this, that, and the other. And I applied, and I ended up getting that position. And so I was really excited, because that was one of the first times that I had actually kind of veered out of my rural sort of surroundings. And I went to Birmingham, Alabama. And if you can believe it, at the time, that was a culture shock for me. Just going to Birmingham, Alabama was culture shock. Because my where I grew up, the majority of the people look like me, right? So it's 88, 89% African Americans. And so I had not had a lot of interaction with other ethnicities or other races. And so I get to Birmingham and I look around and I'm like, oh, well, the world really is a big place.
Yes.
Imagine that, just from, Birmingham, Alabama. And so my mentor at the time was Dr. Susan Sell. She's a wonderful person. I think she's at UNC Charlotte now. She kind of just took me under her wings, and she said, if you're interested in, this area, then you can do this as well. But I was still sort of dealing with, these internal struggles of, well, I don't see anybody who looks like me in this space. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so because I don't see anybody who looks like me, then this space probably isn't really for me, even though you're telling me that I can do it. And so, she spent that summer, working with me on this project, developing an assay to look for allo inserts, an assay to better detect allo inserts in humans. And so then she also brought me up here to Huntsville to research genetics at the time. So this was a biotech company here in Huntsville, and I got there, and my unwavering spark for everything genetics sort of began at that point. Yeah. Because I walked in and, they were running these huge gels, and I was like, well, I've run really small gels, so maybe I could potentially be a tech. And so they talked to us about the Human Genome Project. So this was around 1998. And so I think the sequence came out around 2000 or so, and Research Genetics was one of the companies that was helping. And so I was so inspired by the Human Genome Project and everything and all the things that I was learning. And so I thought then, well, I'll become, a science writer so that people with backgrounds like mine can learn about all these scientific advances and things like that. Because I know that they, don't know about them. Like we had limited access to STEM-based areas and careers and things. But then when I got to undergrad, I had several other mentors that were kind of, pushing me to go into a scientific career. And at the time I was still dealing with this, do I belong? Am I good enough? I don't see people like me in this space of genetics. And that's a hurdle that, I think a lot of students with backgrounds like mine, especially, kind of have to try to overcome.
Yes.
And so, like throughout my undergrad career, I was always in that space where I didn't feel like I was good enough. I knew I was smart because people would tell me, oh, you're really, really smart. But I just didn't feel like I had what it took to get there. And so I did internships. I applied for internships at Yale, at Caltech, at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, thinking that these people are going to turn me down, but they all said yes.
Wow.
So I did.
You are smart. Wow.
I did summer internships every year except for the year after my freshman year. And so all of those programs were geared towards encouraging you to get your PhD, right? So they're giving you this training experience where you're able to develop skill sets, but also, encouraging you to go that route. And so it was in my senior year where Dr. Susan Sell contacted me again, and she's like, well, what are your plans? And I said, well, honestly, I'm not really sure. And she said, well, you should apply to graduate school to get your PhD. And again, I'm thinking, well, I'm probably not good enough, but I'll do it just to see,
why not?
What happens. And then lo and behold, I got into every grad school program that I applied to. And that's when I started thinking, these people evaluated my application and they felt like I was good enough.
Yes.
So maybe I can do this thing, right? Maybe I can do the science thing. And I ended up at UAB in Birmingham, University of Alabama at Birmingham, in their genetics program. And at the time, that program had merged between two other programs. I forget what they were beforehand. But afterwards, it was called the Interdisciplinary Genetics Graduate Program. And so I was one of the first students in that newly merged program. And at first, it was very challenging. I realized that for all of the technical skills that I had gained, I needed to do a bit more work on the theoretical side. And so, you have a PhD, Alex, so that training can be pretty rigorous, right?
Oh, yeah.
The hurdles and things that you have to go through. And so at that time, I was also dealing with some family stuff because my mom had gotten really sick. So I was traveling back and forth, taking her to the doctor while trying to get my PhD at the same time.
Oof.
And it was very difficult, but I ended up pulling it out, ended up graduating. I got my degree in genetics, and my dissertation project was focused on genome copy number alterations in African American and European American women who had early onset breast cancer. So trying to understand why it is that African American women tend to get breast cancer at an earlier age, and then they're also more likely to die from the disease than their Caucasian American counterparts.
Oh, interesting. Wow.
Yeah. And so we knew at the time that there were some confounders that could contribute to those disparities, like access to healthcare, for example, level of education, age at first live birth, for example. But when you control for all of those things, then the disparities still persisted. And so my research project was focused on trying to look at differences in tumor biology, right? So looking at expression of estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, HER2/neu, proto-oncogene, and then also correlating those expression levels with copy number variations, so gains and deletions of genomic regions. And so that was my first introduction kind of to some bioinformatics, even though most of the workflows were already figured out for me. I just had to implement them in my study. And so then, I finished that research and then did a postdoc as well at UAB. I was offered postdoc in a couple of other areas, but I decided to stay at UAB because my mom was still kind of sick at that time, and I wanted to kind of be near or be close to them. And I did a postdoc with Marianne Bjornstee in pharmacology and toxicology, so still focused on cancer, but now looking at a cancer signaling pathway called TOR, or target of rapamycin, combining different chemotherapeutic agents and determining how DNA damaging signals are affected. And so I was there for a really long time. That was a long postdoc. It was about 4.5 years, I think.
That's pretty normal now.
Yeah.
Yes, it is. It is.
I was 7.
And luckily, Mary, 7?
7 years before I got my first job
Oh, wow. Yeah.
after that.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Marianne, wonderful mentor, she allowed me to stay an additional year after, because my mom had passed during that time as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And so she allowed me to stay an additional year to kind of get myself together and then decide what I wanted to do. And so I had a decision to make, whether or not I was going to, continue along the research path, or if I was going to do what it was that I was really passionate about, which is providing opportunities for students like me, so that they can believe in themselves and know that, you can do this, you can exist in this space and you can have a successful career in this space. And if I was going to do that, the only place I really wanted to do it was going to be my alma mater, which is Alabama A&M University.
Great.
And so it just so happens that around the time that I was applying for jobs, there was a vacancy for assistant professor of genetics here at A&M.
Wow.
And so I applied, ended up getting the position, and here I am.
That's
what an inspiring story.
Yeah. So with that, there's a couple of things you were so you didn't realize until you were low 20s that you were able to do this.
Yeah. Yes.
That's really
because
interesting,
even though I was exposed to it, going through the internships, doing the Belper program, internships throughout undergrad, I never really saw myself as being able to lead a research program or being the lead person, right? Being a PI. I saw myself as being maybe someone who could work in a lab and do some experiments. Those people are important as well. But I just did not see myself being where I am today for sure.
Interesting.
I didn't think that I could do it. Yeah.
So it's a ceiling. You felt like there was a ceiling and you didn't realize there wasn't. You were just making it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that when you grow up and you are kind of, you're worried about where your next meal is going to come from. You're worried about, just basic necessities of life. You don't necessarily have the time to kind of look into other opportunities. And of course, like I said, I was from rural Alabama, so those things were not readily visible in that space either. Yeah. Yeah. So it took individuals who were outside of that space, getting a grant and then reaching back and saying, okay, we want to do something for kids that are coming from rural Alabama.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's, I guess, I worked with you this summer. You have I think it was a DOD grant, right? That you're working on for training. And I didn't realize, but you have other projects going on too, right? You're doing a lot of that.
Yeah.
You're paying it forward multiple times over.
Definitely. Because I know firsthand, right, the impact that those types of experiences can have. My experiences have changed the trajectory of my life, not just my career, but my entire life. Yeah. And because I know that those experiences can be so transformative, that's a space that I want to develop for other students like me, because I know that many of them, especially those here at A&M, have backgrounds very similar to mine.
Well, so do you feel, this is maybe it's too personal of a question, don't answer it if you don't want to, but do you feel like, so this takes a lot of time, right? And I know this personally because I'm spending a lot of time that I have to help out people. I want to get more people trained, right? And I really like taking my time and doing that. But I've gotten a research program was really a decade into it before I started really detaching from that. And so, and I was always pretty research focused, but now I've like really shifted a lot towards training and really teaching kind of stuff. Yeah. And so do you feel like, there's no way to balance this stuff, right? You just have to sort of commit to different things. And so are you happy with your path of like maybe being a little more teaching heavy and trying to reach these people that desperately need that reaching versus like, going off into a lab and pipetting and, winning a Nobel Prize? Like, I mean, do you feel like, you've shorted yourself a little bit or anything? Like, I mean, like, don't answer if it's too personal. I'm not sure if I'm asking the question right either.
So I will say this. I don't mind being in a lab with a pipette if I'm teaching someone and they're gaining the skills, right? Yep. For me, it's more so about them developing the skills and having their world be opened to new things than me winning the Nobel Prize, for sure.
Yeah. Which you could, by the way, based on your story.
Yeah. Well, I wish. You're too kind.
Well, there's medicine and peace. There's 2 prizes you could win, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I didn't think about that. Yeah. So for me, the mentoring aspect of my job, I absolutely love. The advising aspect, I absolutely love, because I find that I play the role of, instructor, of confidant, of supporter, of encourager, mama, daddy, sister, brother, all of these different hats. And, the students that I serve, they need that type of nurturing. It's the type of nurturing that I needed and the type of nurturing that individuals gave to me. When I was in high school, I had great high school teachers that, fed into me. College professors, and then my mentors in grad school and beyond. And, sometimes I think, it takes that level of nurturing to get someone out of their head thinking, oh, I can't do this and this is not for me. And this is beyond what it is that I am supposed to do in life. Yeah. And so for me, seeing students learn something new and get excited about it, that's the most rewarding part of my job.
Yeah, that's a part that doesn't get talked about. I mean, I guess maybe like even like teachers don't maybe talk about it enough. How important that is, but also, I mean, I've taught at high school level and college level and everything, and to do that, to really care at that level is so exhausting emotionally. Yeah, I found even if you're like pretty good at like, just taking it as little as you can, right, just helping out, but like you have to get inside some people's heads sometimes, right? You have to mind meld with somebody and really to get them, especially people who don't know what I find that people I see people, you're one of these people. I mean, I know this about you, that I see you for like 5 minutes into it and you already hear about it from somebody else before I meet you, that you're this kind of person, you're going to do amazing things. And so sometimes I see that in a person and they don't know that they can do these things exactly like you're talking about. There's a feeling, and this is from like people all backgrounds, right? And then that rare time where you're the one that actually you realize that you're mentoring them and you help them kind of you can't break the ceiling. It's not glass. It's not there, right? And then when they start to that process, like that's one of the best parts of it. And it can happen when you're like learning about, I don't know, some DNA replication, some topic or something. Or, like I can go to graduate school or I got D's, but, I got an A in your class. And like, when people make that shift, it's so cool. It's just it makes all that like, oh my gosh, that was so hard today, kind of just worth it and go away until the next time it happens.
Yeah, absolutely. I got an email from one of my advisees. She is pursuing her PhD in biomedical engineering at UAB. Yeah. And I remember when she was applying for the program, how nervous she was, how she felt like she, probably couldn't do this. And I just talked to her about my story and told her, about how I had these same sort of feelings and emotions. And I went through this as well. And she's like a year in now. And she just emailed me and said, I'm finally comfortable in this space. Like, I think this is doable. I think this is something that I can do. Yeah.
Good.
I was so excited to get that.
And so,
Yeah, I find too, like, go ahead, David. Sorry.
Sorry, I was just going to say, Dr. Farmer, your story, you talk a little bit about nurturing as well as, this invisible ceiling, which in some cases is not invisible, but, I think if it exists in the mind, it's all about perception.
Yeah.
And then also even awareness and access. And so, the idea that, back when you were getting these wonderful opportunities, it was pre-internet. And you didn't have the virtual learning kind of capabilities that exist now, or the virtual jobs, or the virtual research. And so, you had to travel to Birmingham and you saw these people. I wonder, now, because you've participated in these virtual biohackathons, and we've had a number of, HBCU students come together, as teams virtually and work on, real serious cancer issues, come together as a team, generate a hypothesis, do the research. And it's so incredibly rewarding, to watch that. And so for me, that's, a level of access, and training that happens. Nurturing, of course, is a critical part of it. And so that's the two of you are doing such a fabulous job opening your heart to these students and, helping them through. We're trying to build a mentoring network for the biohackers so that, it can scale beyond the two of you. There's only so many hours in the day. But, talk a little bit about how you think we can scale these skills into the hands of the underrepresented students, that have a similar story to yours, using technology potentially, right? Something that didn't exist 20 years ago.
Yeah. So the biohackathon that we just did, I thought was, fantastic. I just seeing the students grow from not knowing anything at all, getting to the point where they're really kind of becoming comfortable with command line and doing some of these analyses and things. And then seeing their, this sort of spark that sort of was generated in them as well. So I am a big believer that when you see that spark, you can utilize that spark in order to draw other students and, to this area. I really, really believe in like peer mentorship, for example. Yeah. And so I've had conversations with the students that participated in the hackathon that we just did about, now you should go back and tell your peers about what it is that you did, right? You generated this list of differentially expressed genes in breast cancer that, could be relevant for understanding the etiology of the disease, right? That's really exciting. So go back to your peers and talk to them about your experience, right? And, you now become a mentor kind of to your peers. And so for me, because I think that sometimes we place people like me or like Alex in front of students and we give our inspirational story and students are like, yeah, that's cool. That's interesting. But I think that when you place their peers in front of them, they're more likely to listen, especially this generation, right? They're more likely to listen to someone who has recently gone through what it is that you're trying to give other students access to. And so that's what I'm trying to encourage my current cohort or my previous, my immediately past cohort of participants to do. And the fact that we were able to do it in a virtual environment, like with no hiccups whatsoever, I think that just kind of speaks to the ability of how we can utilize technology to reach people all across. Like a couple of the students actually were not even here in Huntsville. Right. So we were in other areas. Only one of them was here in Huntsville. And so utilizing technology in that way to sort of bridge that gap, I think, is kind of the best way pretty much to do this. Like Alex didn't have to travel here. We didn't have to travel to where he was in order to do this hackathon. We can do it all just virtually.
And theoretically, anybody on the planet can participate. We've had people from other, I do that work with people in other countries all the time. And there's this, we can aggregate the best people anywhere, right? And that's the beauty behind it. Yeah. But so
Yes.
there's a mechanism. So those amazing students that thank you for letting me work with them, right? I just love it because it's like, I mean, I think that I feel like I might have contributed to curing cancer by training those students, even for a short period of time. Like I always think they're probably my students are gonna do better science than I do. So I'm not worried about the research thing anymore, right? Like, am I going to be? What's my legacy for what I've given back to my species in science? Well, that's the trainees, right? And it's great.
It's the students.
But
yeah, that's right.
Students, but they can come back into the Discord server. And you'll know about, we were going to have a hackathon next week. We're actually going to postpone it to August. I'm going to keep you in the loop on that. But get them to come back. And if they can bring a pal into it too, right?
Yes.
And then
bring a friend.
Bring a friend and just come to there. And so, at the very least, if they do that, there are people in there that that are mentors, people that can hire them. And we're trying to build this community where they've got the computing resources too. I think we're going to be able to expand that out to have not just the VMs we had, but actually have really big VMs through some national compute resources. I don't want to name it yet until we get it all worked out. But taxpayer dollars, like truly democratizing the computing systems. But if they're comfortable, tell them to come back, right? And tell me that they're doing that, so I can make sure I give them attention. That we want you here. That we want to keep the family reunion never end, and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And if they do that, the beauty I see is that if they start helping out the other students, their friends or somebody else that they have never met, and they're like, oh yeah, this is how you find, grep a pattern in a file, or download all the free cancer data sets that are there, sitting there for anybody in the world to download. So they have a place to go. And we're really trying to create this democratized environment for schools, especially schools that don't have compute, right? The kind of computing that Clemson type schools are elite. We have a campus cluster that, I don't know, millions and millions of dollars have gone into. But that's where come in there. And so not just like hey, this is great, you can do it, but this is great, you can do it, and we'll help you, we'll cheerlead you on that and tell you how to do it, show you how to do it, train you, and give you the compute resources. And I'm really hoping that we build this community where everybody in the community takes it for granted that they have access to things. And they didn't know that, they're at Alabama A&M and they have access to, the biggest computers in the world. And they didn't know that that's like not normal. That should be normal.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. And I will definitely encourage them to bring a friend, because I know that a couple of them are really interested in getting their badge.
Yeah.
And so
thank you for bringing that up. The digital credential is a bridge, and it it allows them to get ultimately the job, right? That they want, whether that job is in biotechnology or really any science related, any STEM field. Yeah. The skills, these computer-based, data-intensive, data science skills that they're getting, through these biohackathons and these training programs, will lead to a badge, which is a verified credential, which will then lead to jobs. And then they'll have the opportunity to do what you're doing, and that is help others do the same. And we really live in an exciting and amazing time, because if you think back to 20 years ago when you did it, it was really wet science, and you had to have access to a lab, a true lab environment with the pipettes and the Erlenmeyer flasks and the centrifuges, right? Right. But now all this amazing science can be done, with a laptop and access to these resources and these skills from anywhere. And these skills are so in demand from, the science community. They need these data scientists and, and these bioinformaticians, et cetera. And they're getting big salaries, and they're in demand. And so it's really an exciting opportunity for underrepresented groups to just kind of blow past the, the traditional system and, become whatever they want to be. Yeah.
And like Alex says all the time, like, you can have a career in this area and never step foot in a wet lab.
Yes.
Right. All you need is the data and a computer. Yeah.
And a little bit of the paradigm shift, which not a shift for a new student, right? They don't have to have a paradigm shift. They can just be given the right paradigm at the start that you can do. I mean, I was trained like you. I mean, I completely wet bench scientist, right? And I went into bioinformatics because I love genomes, right? I think you might have the same thing. I just love the blueprint of an organism.
Yes.
Come on, that's like so cool.
Yeah.
I don't care what it's a platypus or a paramecium or a human or whatever. But you know, really, just I just lost my train of thought. Actually, I lost my train of thought. What was I saying? I started thinking about, you know what it was? I started thinking about genomes. Yeah, I started thinking about.
So excited you couldn't control yourself.
I couldn't. That's my excuse. Anyway, I'm sorry. But no, I'm sorry. No, I was going to say that that they know that, or they come in and they're doing experimental science. They're doing research. They're doing, and I always try to. I'm not super explicit. I try to bring in the scientific method and hypothesis testing at all levels, and then when they're ready, I'm explicit. I'm like, here's hypothesis, because I got taught that. I think that was like elementary school, high school. They started talking about hypothesis testing. I didn't know what they were talking about. I don't think I understood what hypothesis was until I was a postdoc. Honestly, I think I got it a little bit when I was learning what that meant for 5 years as a PhD student. But that can be done earlier. Just getting that idea out there that like,
and publishing.
You can cure cancer.
I mean, how hard was it to publish a scientific paper? And now we have these students coming into these biohackathons. They get their hypothesis. They work on it for a few weeks. They come out with some really cool results, and then they publish a paper. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, the quick turnaround is definitely a draw as well. Whereas you could spend years working on one problem or trying to get one experiment to work in the wet lab.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I wonder what would happen if I had if there's a time shift and I had pre Dr. Tyesha Farmer in high school, in my hackathon, what she would do if she didn't know that there was, you just do this and you figure out what's causing cancer. Like with opposed to like this hierarchy of like, oh, I got to go to college and all these things, which are great things, right? And they should never go away. Right. But it just seems like we could really be doing this earlier. And part of that comes from me, like, and maybe, I don't know, do you feel this way? Like I felt like I had to wait until I'm like 30-ish to start doing science, but I was doing it earlier. I just didn't really feel like I was worthy of it until that point, or just I wasn't wise yet.
Yeah,
it took a while.
Yeah, or maybe the paradigm didn't consider you to be worthy of it until later.
Maybe, yeah. Right. I don't know. I think it's just like I never felt like and I still feel like I know 1% of what I need to know to do my job. But like I was at like 0.1%, it just wasn't enough.
We're all in trouble if you're at 1%, dude.
Well, but if that just if those numbers, everybody's at 5%. If we had 5% of the people at 5%, I mean, we would be living in a utopia. All problems would be solved. Doesn't have to be everybody. Right?
Yeah.
Or am I going too far?
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, even being an instructor, when I got my first faculty position, no one ever taught me how to teach on this level, like on the college level. It's kind of like you're thrown into it and you're supposed to kind of figure it out. And I think it works, that way for a lot of people. You aren't necessarily trained to teach.
That's right.
But you're expected to do it. Right. We won't necessarily get a degree in education in the teaching of others, but you're expected to be able to do it and to learn about pedagogy and things like that. So, yeah.
It is. I mean, it is a challenge. And it's interesting, that once you're an expert in the field, you have a PhD, you obviously know how to share that wisdom with others, but you don't. I mean, it's and everybody has a very unique style and way of going about it. I'm a classically trained instructional designer. Alex is a, fly by the seat of your pants, expert with tremendous heart, who has learned over time to become, a fabulous professor. You're the same way. You're, maybe a little bit more organized, which is very important. I believe in scaffolding and all those things, but everybody has their own kind of approach, and it's exciting to see how your personality comes through, with the students. But ultimately, if you're an expert in the field and you care about your students, it doesn't matter. It's going to be successful. So let's talk about some of your projects. I mean, we talked about your story and your passion, your path and your passion, and then, what kind of activities you're involved in. A lot of pretty exciting and interesting projects, many of them funded through grants, et cetera.
Yeah. And they all have a component where we're providing, or a major component where we're providing opportunities for students to be exposed to some areas that they may not have even considered. For example, the majority of the students that I teach want to go into healthcare, into medicine.
Yep.
And so, I tell them, that's great, that's wonderful, but also consider, having a plan B or a plan C and a plan D as well. So think about some of these, other career paths that can be just as rewarding, just as lucrative as having a career in medicine or dentistry, pharmacy, or what have you. And so one of the grants that I've been involved in is a NSF-funded grant called EA3, so Expanding Access to Alabama Agriscience. And so in that grant, we're trying to bridge together some of the resources that we have here in Alabama for getting students into agriscience and excited about agriscience.
Good.
And so one of the things that we've noted is that Alabama is full of, we have lots of programs, we have lots of institutions, but they're not very well streamlined. And so through this EA3 grant, we brought together, stakeholders in all of these different areas, education institutions, industry as well, ag science, teachers, secondary educators. And we brought all these individuals together to have conversations about how can we build a bridge that pulls together all of our resources so that we have an ecosystem to provide opportunities for students, and so that they don't get lost, as they go and throughout the pipeline, right? So as they matriculate through, starting at an early age, and then extending through high school and college, and then, graduate school, if that's what they want to do, and then even in the career force as well. And our target, of course, is underrepresented minorities, getting them in these career pathways, but starting at an early age. And so we've had some really, really good conversations about what the barriers are, which I think many of the barriers are actually applicable not just to agriscience, but many of the STEM areas as well, biotech, bioinformatics, genetics, whatever, what have you. How do we go about addressing those barriers, which actually are usually multifaceted, very complex, realizing that we're not going to, solve all of the issues, but what are the main things that we could do, and what resources do we have here in Alabama to kind of try to address them?
How far down do you go in the teaching? I mean, hierarchy.
Grade.
What grade? Yeah, high school.
So, elementary students.
Elementary
Wow.
school. Awesome.
Yeah, and so
Awesome.
And through that, we partnered with Boys and Girls Club to discuss some of the activities that they do that's ag related, because we're trying to not just have it be education based, but also community based. Considering, exposure to agriscience outside of the classroom, the traditional classroom. Because many students think about ag and they think, oh, well, that means that you're going to be working on a farm.
Yes.
Right?
There's so much more than that.
Yeah.
I'm so glad, Dr. Farmer, to hear you talk about agriscience, because, we've always said that in medicine and healthcare, obviously very important, you get to save a life. And in agriscience, you get to save a community. And there's, bioinformatics does not mean, medical. It means biology, and plants are, the food supply. We had Dr. Markandeya Garantla from India on, who's developed this insect pheromone, insecticide. He said that every year, $500 billion worth of food is destroyed, either by, climate science or insects. $500 billion worth of food. you know, the
That's
food
crazy.
supply is a huge issue. And so, you know, we're equal human and plant here at the Praxis BioHackers podcast,
Yeah.
because there's a tremendous amount of need there. He said in his particular company, which is, you know, one of the largest and it's growing in India, he said roughly 40 to 50% of the science is digital, is computational, what we're talking about here. And he said only 10% of, you know, the group, the population, the candidates really know that skill. So he's got a 30% gap, which is a 3 to 4x gap in computational, you know, candidates. And that's, you know, that's just him. Imagine, you know, it could be similar across the board. So we need these, you know, these students and these biohackers in the Agriscience to help us with the food supply, kind of, or else. So I'll get off my soapbox, but you know, I'm really glad you brought that up because that's an important one.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, educating them about what you can do in agriscience. Like, it's not just about farming. It's not just about being out on the farm, right? I mean, like you were saying, you can do bioinformatics based research in agriscience that is very impactful for how it is that we, you know, grow different foodstuffs. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And climate resistance and, you know, all sorts of, you know, other kind of, and I know, Alex, I think you've done work in this. I mean, I think you started potentially your science career in agriscience in some way. Is that right?
I don't think I knew that.
So, so I this interesting. This is very much in my heart too. I mean, I want to cure cancer. I got trained at Vandy to go cure cancer, and I pipetted, and I didn't realize until after I left Vandy. Vandy is like an absolutely amazing school. I knew it was a good school I was at, but all the stuff that was going on, and I go do a postdoc and do DNA methylation in Emory University, which was that was the pinnacle institution for me because I grew up in Atlanta. Like, I'm at Emory, you know. I'm like, wow, everything's great. I did the human genome thing, right? Where I'm like, I had to look at human genome and find combinatorial patterns and some DNA sequences that had some CPG islands. Didn't know what I was doing. Got help from a statistician at Georgia Tech, and you know, started doing all this work, and it was really cool. And then I heard about a plant genome mapping lab in Athens, University of Georgia, and they were doing genome assemblies of like sorghum and cotton and lots of different species, and they were doing like old school mapping and all sorts of, you know, genetic mapping and stuff like that. So I'm like, oh, I got it. I love genomes. That's what I really love. So I jumped the cancer ship, and I think, I mean, honestly, probably 17 years, all I did was work on agricultural systems, a lot of bioenergy crop when I was a professor, crop development when I was at Clemson. And I've shifted now. I'm kind of balancing out between plants and animals. Both of them are really cool. But I realized when I was doing this that I wanted to cure cancer so I could, you know, really help people. And I realized that if you really want to help people, it's through agriculture. Like, if you really want to have an impact on people's lives. But that's a whole too much backstory. What I've really noticed is that question for you on this awesome project you're doing in Alabama, and half my family's from Alabama, so half my heart's down there too. I noticed that one day I had to go do a field day at a research and education center where they grow crops and try things out. And there was a field day with farmers in South Carolina. And like, for some reason, I'm there with this other academic guy, right? And they're like, well, asking me all these questions. And I'm like, I don't know about, you know, how to actually implement a lot of my research. We're really far apart. And so I realized that, like, and I've worked with farmers too and plant breeders before, where there's like, I don't want to change anything. Like, it works, you know, but you gotta, and the plant breeder and the farmer are on top of the pyramid to me. They're the most important people because they actually know how to make it work. Right. Like as opposed to, like, you know, publishing papers in scientific journals and stuff like that. But so I realized that day, I was like, well, I don't know how to talk to these people. And then that ecosystem you're talking about, I think like a training ecosystem and bringing people into it, but also like the industrial ecosystem of really being able to, like, take this tech that we have and really getting it out to the farmers, especially, like, there's a lot of things outside of even genetics, right? Of like, with precision agriculture and just knowing how to interpret drone coverage, right? And processing images from drones to then know how to apply, your pheromones or whatever it is to your field, right? Or your insecticides and stuff like that. But so there's so many places where there's you can get jobs at the farm level, but being a tech support for precision agriculture and drone mapping, or you can work with a plant breeder and you can do whole genome sequencing. We've done that with sorghum. Most people never even heard of sorghum, right? But there's so many sorghum genome sequences out there, it's not even funny. But so how you make that, how you activate, you get people in that ecosystem and activate them to increase yield or, make jobs for Alabama, right? Because it's always local too, right? I'm so glad you're not doing this in the Southeast because you're doing it in Alabama. And I know Alabama, there's different ecosystems within Alabama, right? There's different cultural, that's different. We're North and South Alabama and lots of places in between are very different. So
very different,
are y'all successful with that? How is it going? This is a massive project you're doing. Are you making progress?
Yeah. So, this was a planning grant where we sort of, we have these think tanks where we come in and we talk about, what the issues are, what resources are available here in Alabama, how we could potentially bridge the gaps and then address the issues. We have this wonderful fishbone diagram that sort of spells out this broadening participation challenge within Agriscience, and then things that we could potentially do to kind of address the bones of the fishbone diagram. Of course, we can't, like I said, we can't address everything, but there are some things that we can do definitely to have impact in this area. And so that was the first step, right, for this planning grant, kind of defining the problem and then kind of spelling out what resources are available and how we could potentially go about addressing it. And then the next step is to get funding to actually do some of this stuff. In addition to writing up a formal document that sort of talks about what we found are the issues, right, where the gaps are and how we can get underrepresented minorities into this area. Yeah.
Fantastic.
And so, And then are you thinking, what kind of time scale are you thinking about? Just getting this up and running? Or are you thinking let's kind of plan something for 10 years? What is the...
So I think that our next step is to get this document together because it's something that we've discussed potentially, bringing to our lawmakers, and our STEM council. So our Alabama has a STEM council that is addressing sort of ways in which we can get more students into STEM. And so bringing it to the STEM council and getting it funded, maybe from the law, Congress, or not Congress, from the state legislature level first, and then trying to go out and get external funding for addressing some of these things.
Okay. All right. Well, I hope you're the one that goes and does the committee presentation to the lawmakers.
The lawmakers,
They'll believe you.
Yeah, I don't think it'll... I doubt it would be me. It'd probably be Neil Lamb, who's now the president of Hudson Alpha. Yeah.
Oh, really? Cool.
Yeah. He was on this grant with us. Yeah. He was actually the PI, and we were co-PIs. Yeah.
Awesome.
That's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, we love what Hudson Alpha is doing. I mean, we've got a few of their folks that are involved in Praxis, and it's really an exciting time for people to invest in this space, and especially in Alabama. I mean, becoming a biotech hub. I mean, congratulations.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we start to wind down, and thank you again so much, this has been a fascinating conversation. We always love to ask, what is a biohacker to you, Dr. Farmer?
A biohacker to me is someone who is curious and who wants to solve the world's problems in a virtual space, right? So someone who's not afraid to kind of get in this space and get big data and analyze it, and who wants to make an impact in this area that way. Yeah, that's kind of how I see biohackers.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Love it.
And we appreciate the support for the biohacker community, and especially, reaching out to those underrepresented groups and getting them excited. That's really the mission that we have here at Praxis. And if anybody's interested out there in getting involved in these biohackathons, check out hackers.bio. We post all of the free biohackathons there. And then, of course, you can come to prxai.com and take a look at our courses and our digital credentials to help get you spun up on this cool new technology. So closing thoughts, Dr. Farmer.
Closing thoughts. I'm looking forward to working with you guys more, providing more opportunities for our students. I'm already thinking of another grant that I have that I want to talk to Alex about. Providing some training for an additional group of students as well to get some bioinformatics training. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm all ears for that. Thank you. Yeah. And my closing thought is I have to say I love my job, my life, because I get to work with people like you, and I come out of nowhere, right? I get to meet people that it's very inspiring to see other people that are passionate about helping out people, because you hear so much like negative noise during the day about, I hate this person, I hate that person, who's a real American, who's not. And then there's these people that are not in Twitter ranting and raving, who are out there working their butts off, getting the job done. And it's so great to meet people like that and partner, right? And let's see if we can reinvent and, create, not just create an ecosystem for economic development, but change the way we do things where it's more, we're all in this together. I think I see it. You give me hope. Mm-hmm. David, you give me hope. A lot of people that we work with it's just fantastic. I love it.
You give us hope, Dr. Farmer. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And the BioHackers, thank you so much for joining today's show. And we look forward to having you back on the show very soon. Good luck with all of your projects and collaboration. Thank you, BioHackers, for joining us today. Cue the closing song.